Everything's on record now.
If you don't want a look of amazement on your face, like on YouTube, now would be a good time to hide your camera, but feel free to stay visible if you want, so we can see jaws dropping. Let me share my screen. I think it's that one. Cool. And why I thought of doing this meetup topic is there's just been a few things recently that's literally had me going, wait, what? I wish I'd known that earlier. Some of these things are really, really simple. So especially the stuff I'm going to show you, none of it's rocket science, but if you don't know it, you don't know it. So it'll be really interesting to know in the chat who knows of these things, or who has been waiting for a tip like this to fall into their lap in order to make their life a little bit easier. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to do 5 tips, and then I think Jonathan, you're up next. I think is going to do 5 tips, and then Phil's going to do 5 tips. We might take some questions. We've got some more tips in our back pocket in need, but we also welcome if anyone's got anything really awesome that they want to share in terms of your own tips. Please don't hold back. And now my first one is something I have been complaining about for a long, long time, and that is how hard it is when you've got a whole bunch of tabs down the bottom of your screen to drag something from one end of your report to another, especially if you go and add a new tab to the end that you then want to drag to the top. And just to illustrate that, I'm just going to click this new page thing here on the far right. And hey, we've got a new page here, and I want to put this maybe first. So let's just call it introduction. Oops. Oh, sorry. Get that out of the way. And if you've been in the same boat as me, you've cursed a lot trying to get this thing right to the far left, because unlike Excel, which will just give you a right-click move option, or in Excel you can just move it over here and hover it over here, and I think the scroll bar will scroll. Nothing happens, and so you end up doing this thing in a whole bunch of little click and drag. So if I let it go there, great, I can't even see it. I've got to kind of go forward one. There it is. It'll pull it out, drag it to the next section, go forward. And so, you know, it can take you a heck of a lot of time to move a tab, and that's really painful, especially if you need to reorder tabs for end users to use. And just the other day on Twitter, somebody tagged me, and they said, "Oh, Insights Machine, you're going to love this. This fantastic tip here from Megan on LinkedIn, just to show you how easy this is. All you need to do this, I'm going to do it again actually. In fact, I'm going to put this tip one at the end, is you need to left click on your tab that you want to move, and you need to push tab without letting go of your left click. And this tabs the scroll bar, or the carousel, or whatever you call it, across. And when you get to where you want to go, then without letting go of your click, you just drag your item over there. There it is, tip one. So I didn't explain it well.
And does Shift tab go the other way?
I'm going to go right to the start and just show you again. So we're on introduction. I want to make a new tab. It goes to the bottom. I want to move it to the start. Tabbing normally just tabs you through the tab order, but if you hold click while you tab, great, it tabs us. As you can see, it's kind of gone to the right a little bit. It's warning us it's going to go right to the very far left. One more tab takes us right to the very far left, and then fantastic, without letting go of click, I'm just dragging, I'm moving my cursor over here, and then letting go of my click, and there's my new page. Really, really simple. This has been something that has been bugging me for a long time.
Jeff, does Shift tab go the opposite way?
It does, thank you, Phil. So if you left click and Shift tab, we'll see here that, well, in fact, before I left click, if I just tab, you'll see it tabs through that way, and if I shift tab, it tabs through that way. So whatever whatever tab you want to move, click it, and then tab or shift tab as appropriate. Oops, sorry, I actually didn't mean to, I didn't really want to do that actually. Whatever tab you're on, if you want to move it, tab to move right, shift tab to move left. If you're already at the end of the carousel, then it will tab to the start. If you're already at the start and you want to quickly get to the end, then you would shift tab to tab left, and then just let go, and your report will be taken there. So very simple tip. Kind of a bonus tip on that one. A lot of people don't realise, both in Excel and Power BI, that instead of kind of tabbing across here looking for tabs, you can actually right-click on this like little divider thing here and get a list of your tabs. So something simple, but you'll be surprised how many people don't know that. So this is a way to quickly navigate there. Again, if I navigate to tip 1, unfortunately, it doesn't actually highlight the bar. You've still got to go searching for it, but there I am. Again, if I want to move this tip 1 right to the start of the tab board again, I'm just going to click on it, push tab, and kind of drag it over here. You can't actually really see it being dragged. Sometimes it shows, sometimes it doesn't, but who cares, it gets there. So that's my first very simple tip. So thanks to Megan for bringing that to my attention. It's fantastic. This is another thing that's so simple, but not many people know, and I didn't know it until I think I saw a tweet by, maybe it was Chris Hamill, who works with Phil on the CAT team, calling this out. And this is the fact that we've got in Power BI, we've got a whole bunch of kind of optional tabs that we've got optional tabs that we can show. So we've got these ones that are always here: fields, visualizations, filters pane. I'm just going to turn it off for a second because I forgot it was open. Here we can go, for instance, we can go, hey, I also want to see this thing called the selection pane, and I also want to see the bookmarks pane and the performance analyzer, which I learned today looks a little bit rude if you make it as thin as it possibly can. I also want to look at the sync slices pane. And if you're developing Power BI reports, you tend to use these things quite a lot. And unlike these other kind of permanent tabs, panes that have this little closed chevrons and open chevrons, these ones don't have it. So for a long time, I found myself having these open to do something, being unable to see my report, then collapsing these things again, just to later on, after I've made some changes to the dashboard, just to later on turn them on again. And that drove me absolutely crazy. And Chris Hamill said, I think it was, said, hey, you don't have to click the X. You can click anywhere but the X, and it minimizes it. Now, something really simple, but a lot of people don't know this, including me, a heavyweight Power BI user as recent as a year ago. In fact, even with these visualizations and fields ones, you don't have to click on the chevron. You just have to click somewhere in the title. So if I just collapse these for a second, that's what I've got here on my little example here. You know, if you want to collapse any of these, click on any of the green bits. Anything but the X will collapse it, and then you'll be able to instantly expand them again at your leisure. Hopefully someone's out there is going, yes, it's been killing me. All right, you can see how simple my tips are. Let's have a look at number 3. Oh, right, that's right. Edit interactions. So you are probably aware, if you've been making Power BI dashboards for some time, that if you click on one visual, it often filters another in a particular way, and often it's not the way that you want, or you might want to actually stop one visual from interacting on another. And here's a classic example. I've got a couple of Zebra BI charts here. Better show the Zebra BI t-shirt in case Andre catches this later on. And Zebra BI is a really cool custom visual that I use for Power BI. And we've got exports to the US and imports to the US. And often when you've got a visual like this, it doesn't make sense, say, if you click, if a user was to click on the bottom visual, it doesn't make sense that it would filter the top one down to a point. You know, maybe it would make sense that it filters some other visual, but when we're comparing two visuals year on year, we actually want to turn interactions off here. And normally it's fairly easy, but sometimes it gets tricky, especially if you've got lots of items on the canvas, and especially if they're parked quite close like this. And this is a pattern I use quite a lot. I often have visual overkill, lots of graphs abutting each other, and sometimes it can be very, very tricky to get at buttons. And so I thought I'd show you a particular trick that I've discovered recently. Let me show you first of all what happens if let me just think about this, if I do this the right way around. If I click on the, first of all, I've got to actually go to the format pane. If I click on the outside, to do edit interactions, you've got to click format and then edit interactions. You get all these lovely little things that pop up. And let me actually click this one here to show you how easy it is for starters. Great, so I've selected this visual, and all these little keys have come up that let me control whether this visual is going to filter these other ones or not. And the reason there's a couple here is I actually am faking a title with a text box here. So one of these is to do with this text box. I don't really care about that. The other one is to do with this actual Zebra BI top visual. So to demonstrate this, if I filter this down to a particular point and I go, hey, I don't want this one filtered, I would just click this thing here. You'll see when I hover over it, it says we want no interaction. Fantastic. Okay, great. So we've killed interaction for that one. All well and good. Everybody probably knows that. What happens if we select this top one though? We've got a problem here in that, again, we've got two toggles here. One of these is to do with a fake text box I'm using here to do something with the title. I won't bore you with the details as to why I'm doing that. But that's actually not the one we want to turn off, and I'll just demonstrate that. If I click this, it's not killing interactions with this graph, because the one we actually want is this particular one underneath, and that's a real pain to get to. And previously what you might have done is resign yourself to moving one of these visuals out of the way, whoops, killing the interaction and then moving it back. And that can be a real pain if you've got a whole bunch of these things. But there's actually a much easier way. I'm just going to hit undo to show you the easier way. Let me just make sure I'm there. Okay, cool. And that is, you can use a selection pane to do it. But there's a trick. So selection pane is this, let me show you how to bring it up again. It's a optional pane that I think you should always have open. It's I find it very important for Power BI makers. To get it, we go View, Selection Pane. Another thing I'd recommend in the Selection Pane is to give things really, really good names. Some of these I've named quite well, others I haven't, because this is just a demo file. But how you actually do this is, if the item that you're trying to control interactions from is obscuring other things that you want to control the interactions of, first of all, you hide it in the selection pane, which is great. It's gone. It's no longer in the way. But now you can't select it in order to bring up those checkboxes. However, oops, I didn't mean to do that. However, while it's hidden, if you select it again in the selection pane, then you get those chevrons that you need, or they're not called chevrons, I don't know what they're called. So now I can turn the interaction off and then make the visual visible again. And now that's something that drove me crazy for a long time. I would make up these big matrices of panels of charts, especially back before we had small multiples, and then I would find in order to disable interactions on some of them, I would have to move almost all of them multiple times. It was like some kind of factorial thing. So that's a simple little tip. And there's a bonus with that one, that there's actually some global settings that control some of this behavior as well. Let me just switch to my other workbook. This comes from Ray Does Data at Twitter. I don't know if Ray's on the call, but Ray, this is a great time saver. This was another, wait, what? I didn't know the setting was there. By default, Power BI does cross-filtering visuals. And what I mean by that is I've got some country categories here and some charts here. And if I click on, say, Canada, you get this cross-filtering type of effect where you can see the old value, but it's been filtered down to see the new value. And it's really cool, but you know what? I hardly ever use that. So I used to spend an awful lot of time changing the visualizations options. Again, I'm just going to show you that you do that via edit interactions as well. And this only appears on particular types of graphs, like you don't have this option for a line chart, but for a column chart, you'll see I've got two options here. I've got a highlight option or a filter option. So I could select the filter options of these if I wanted to. I'm not sure if this is going to ruin my effect, actually. Let's double check. I select the filter, and you can see that I've gone from cross-highlighting to filtering on that particular chart, which is great, but it can be a real pain to do this in bulk. I'm just going to hit undo because I don't want to ruin my defaults. So the thing is, though, that you can actually do this globally. And I've actually got a couple of different options here on the right-hand side. So I'm just going to show you how you do this. File, options and setting. Options, it's a setting local to this file. It is, I think it's this one here. Yes, it is. Report settings. So here we go. Change the default visual interaction from cross-highlighting to cross-filtering. So if you find yourself toggling these buttons a lot, you may want to do this at the report level. All I need to do is click this, and I'm trying to think if it worked or not. It might not have worked in this particular instance because I changed some of these. I didn't do this before when I was, oh no, it did work, look at that. Okay, so now it no longer cross filters, it filters directly. Let's do that again. Let's make it go back. Options and settings, options. Just wait for it to come up. Here we go. Scroll down. Report settings. So we want to put it back to cross filtering. Then now when I'm clicking on these things, that's cross filtering. So that may save you some time. There's actually another option which is good in two cases. One is because it might save a heck of a lot of resource, because every time you're clicking on these things, it's sending all these cross-filtering queries to all these other visuals, and you might not care about that. You might not want that. Or you might have a whole bunch of visuals. You might have, I don't know, 20 visuals on the page, but you only might want just 2 of them to interact and to go through and do all the permutations of for every visual to say only interact with this one and this one, but none of the others. Could take hours. So this is a really handy setting here. This reduced number of queries by disabling cross-highlighting filtering by default. So I'm going to actually just quickly show you that one as well. I think I want to turn this off. No, I don't. Again, we go options and settings, options. And that is under query reduction, disabling cross-highlighting filtering by default. If we switch that on, then you would have noticed that these little don't filter me icons changed from whatever the default I was had chosen to, hey, don't muck around with me. That's a very, very handy setting. So thanks, Ray, if you're out there for the heads up. Found it very useful. Just switch back to my report. All right, 4th tip. This is a great one. Here we go. This is a ZebraBI visual I've got on the left-hand side. Again, it's a custom visual that I use a lot. It's very, very cool. And Andre from ZebraBI has done a lot of work to make sure that it complies with something called the IBCS standard, which is a kind of a business communication standard that essentially helps us see trends and numbers clearly, quickly. And on the right, I've got kind of a Power BI equivalent. Now, you can see that there's some differences. So this is just a table with data bars on it. This too is a table. It kind of looks like a bar chart, but it's actually a ZebraBI table. It's kind of a matrix, really. And you can see that Andre's visual is great in that these bars don't overlap the numbers. It's also cool in that we've got something called an integrated variance going. What that means is here I'm actually comparing this year to the change from last year. So the green shows growth and the orange shows falls. What a surprise, big fall in travel and personal travel. Wonder why that would be. Over here, we've just got a standard Power BI table with data bars on it, and data bars, unfortunately, in Power BI natively overlap the numbers. And this really means you're limited to what kind of colors you can use. Normally, you could only have a data bar on a visual like this if you chose a very light color that allowed the number to show through. And that's really limiting. So that's a real pain. What you can do, though, is you can do this little hack. Let me just think about this. So we can put in another, just going to add a new measure. I'm going to stick it on the, put it on this table. New measure. We can create a new measure that just references the measures we're already using. Should be using Tabular Editor to do this, but let's just call this. Now I might have already created these. I'm not sure. Let's just call it exports bar. Reference the measure that I'm already using, which is total exports year to date. So we've got a new measure. I'm just actually going to drop out imports out of here just to save time, because you only really need to see this done once. Think about this. So just pure imports. Okay, cool. All right. So we've got another measure. It's just a copy of this one. We can use that if I can find it. What do I call it? Data bar. I can't remember what I called it now. Maybe I didn't save. That's funny. I could have sworn exports bar. That's what I called it. Okay, great. I'll chuck this other measure in here. We've got a measure with data bars. We've got a measure with numbers. But what we can do now is actually change these settings. So under conditional formatting, I'm just actually going to remove conditional formatting from this first one. And we're just going to have the number in this particular one. And in the bar, this also shows you how to apply, how easy it is to apply conditional formatting if you haven't done this before. Conditional formatting data bars. We get an option here to show bar only. I always change this minimum to 0. I probably should set up a JSON file that does this automatically. We'll change it to black. I always set the axis to the same color too, by the way, because it just gives a nicer appearance. And we click OK. Cool. So we now can use the color that we want and make this whatever kind of width we want. It doesn't take up too much more space, and we're kind of faking what Andre does over here with the Zebra BI ones. I'll just change the order of these. Now, Daniel Marsh Patrick gave me a really, really cool tip on Twitter on how to make this even better. And he says, hey, you can put a white space character here so that there's no column header here whatsoever, so it kind of looks cooler. And he pointed me to the site, beautifulgingbats.com/whitespace. Let me just click on that. Yeah. Where you can copy all these kind of non-printing spaces, characters that aren't spaces, just by clicking on one of these things. Here's a 0 width one. Oops. Just by clicking on that, it copies it to my clipboard. We can go back to Power BI, and I can click on this visual. In fact, first of all, let me show you why this is needed, this white space hack. So I want to change this export bar to maybe just a space, right? Because I don't want anything to appear in the column, but it just doesn't accept a space. It's a real pain. But if I double click this and just paste that non-printing white space character, it does. So now we have a lovely data bar. Now I would probably in the real life, I would probably put it on that side. So we have our exports figure and our data bar on this side. So that's a real cool little hack for dense reports. You know, I would probably have exports in one column, imports in the other, and maybe I'd color code them accordingly. A little bonus tip, since we're here looking at Zebra BI, it is a very, very cool set of custom visuals. I really recommend you take a look at this YouTube video, because not only does Andre give Zebra BI a good workout, but he actually shows you how a lot of reports using a lot of the native stuff that we use just really don't work. They break some really, really bad principles. We'll chuck these. I'll chuck the slide up after the meetup. I've just got to make some more notes in it and put some stuff out. But I highly recommend you check out the video. There's some other real cool tips in there too that I won't have time to go into, but I learned myself. And here's my last one. It's my favorite. Did I bring my ruler? No, I didn't. Sorry, I normally have a prop. Oh, I do have my ruler. This is, until recently, this was one of my most used bits of equipment for Power BI. Putting a ruler up against the screen to align column widths. And in fact, a friend of mine, Raf, couldn't work out why his laptop was so dirty, and then he figured after a while he remembered that it was for the same reason that my laptop screen is dirty, is that he like me was putting a ruler up against it to try and align column widths, because there's no way to do this natively. If you ever tried to do this in Power BI, you know it's a real pain. Got two quick last little tips here for you. Hat tip to the Power BI guy at YouTube and on Twitter for this first one. And I've got my little instructions here on how to do it, because even I forget how to do it. But the trick is we want to make all these things evenly spaced. Now I could put my ruler up and we could manually drag these. I might just turn edit interactions off. Format. Here we go. You know, we could manually drag these if we wanted to, but that's a bit of a pain. What he does is he creates a special measure to do it called spacer. I've already actually created this measure. I'll just go down here. I could do it again. Let's do it again. Think about this. Let's stick it in here. New measure. Anyone learning anything new out there? It's very quiet. Spacer 2, we'll call it. And what we're just going to do is we're going to say, hey, repeat something. We'll use 0 a number of times. I don't know. Let's try 20. That'll do. And this spacer 2, I've already got one called spacer, I think, so that's why I'm calling it spacer 2. Where is this measure? Just find it on the fields list. Spacer 2, cool. So we've got a measure in here. Following the instructions here, I've got to turn this auto size column width toggle to on. I can never remember where the setting is, but you probably know that you can just search for these things. Column width. Auto size is already on. If it's off, you need to turn it on. I think it's on by default. I can't quite recall. We chuck the spacer 2 into the matrix. Now, you may or may not get this behavior in your matrix. So I just want to show you. I want to call out another setting here, which is called show on rows. Let me just find this. And I always forget where this is, but it's probably under values. Show on rows. This is a cool little setting, actually. Just want to show what happens if you toggle this thing. So normally I have it set up like this, so that when I chuck something in my matrix, it puts the spacer, it puts my new measure alongside. But in this particular case, we don't want that. We actually want to use this spacer matrix to set the width of these country columns across the top here. So we want to make sure you've got the show on rows on. I didn't even know you could do that. We want to turn, we've already got the column width toggle on. Oops, I have done something wrong here, folks. Sorry, I've buried my instructions and it hasn't quite worked how I wanted it to work. So what have I done here? Let's chuck this up here. Auto size column with toggle on. I thought I had that on already. I thought that would have, what I'm expecting is that this would have automatically come out wider. I'm just going to, maybe I need to take it out and put it back in again. No, I must have turned that setting off. Apologies, folks. Let me just find that one. Both sides. Okay, maybe I just needed to toggle it off and then toggle it on again. I'm not quite sure what was going on there, but what you can see now is, hey, great. It has automatically spaced to the space of this or to the space of the column. Sometimes we may need to manually adjust a couple of these if we've got really, really long country names, for instance, and you want them to wrap. But you know, it's just they're in the minority. Then we need to turn the setting off because we don't want to muck around with it again. And when we go back to our spacer thing, we remove that from the matrix. Our column now is nice and evenly spaced. This thing, history. There we go. But lastly, that works fine for a matrix, but it doesn't work so well for a table because tables with different measures in there, you've got I've got a different measure in each one of these columns here. So I kind of do a very slight similar tweak where I make up a slightly different equation, repeat a pipe character, repeat it, and then have the 0 repeated some number of times, and then repeat that sequence over and over and over again, and then you whack that into a card visual and use it as a ruler. And I'm just going to unhide my ruler here, Jeff's instant ruler. This is the end result. So it's kind of, it's better than the one that gets finger grease all over your screen. But there's some other stuff we have to do here. We have to turn word wrap off so that these things just continue, no matter what size I extend this to. These things just continue. We need to change the size of the data label from, I think the default card visual is like a 75 or something or other, but you change it to a 12, and then we can use this to align our columns. And I'm afraid to say I did this the other day. It seems like an awful hack, but if you need a ruler, you don't want to get a client screen dirty, you can use this trick. And the trick is great. We just roughly align that one. We roughly align this one. We roughly align the next one, so on and so forth. And if we need this spacer value to be different, hey, that's all right. We can make it. We can change this repeat value here to, I don't know, 15 if we want things to be spaced tighter. Didn't work. Did I push enter? Yes, it did. So we could readjust, or 45, for instance. So hopefully that'll save the screens. Can't wait, Microsoft, for you to actually expose these settings to the user, because these are still really, really awful hacks. That's my 5 tips. I'm going to pass it over now to Jonathan. I hope somebody learned something from all that.
Jeff, Microsoft's going to send you a ruler for Christmas.
Pre-snapped.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Do I need to stop sharing and so you can share?
I can share my screen, I think, from here. Hi, everyone. My name's John. And my tips will hopefully be as exciting as Jeff's. No rulers involved. What screen am I sharing? Sorry, it's a bit buggy. There we go. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Or your cat.
Well, I can.
Oh, the cat's gone.
Yes.
All right. Cool. So I've got 4 instead of 5. So sorry to overpromise. 4 tips. So the first tip I have is for those scenarios where you are building a thin report, or also known as a connected live report, where you connect to an enterprise data set and you're just simply building a report. Often you'll need to create your own kind of report level measures in that report. Not everything is in the enterprise published data set. And if you just name your measures like the measures are named in the enterprise data set, over time it can become confusing. What are your measures and what are the measures in the enterprise data set? And so one way around this that I implemented, which is just to put literally the word custom underscore in front of all of my report level measures. You can pick your own little prefix, if, whatever you like. But what this enables me to do is when I open up my PBIX file and I want to make some changes and I want to see all the custom measures in the search box, I just type in custom underscore and it just lists all of the custom measures that I wrote in that report. So just a little bit of a productivity hack that really helped me personally. Yeah, and then what you can then do from there is, I think Jeffrey mentioned use IMCA's great, what was it called, Jeff? What was the name of the tool? You're on mute, sorry.
Dang it. Yeah, I'll have a look and I'll put a link in the chat.
Yeah, so when it comes to extracting the metadata about your report, which live connection thin reports are supported, it's quite easy to tell which are your measures, because you don't obviously need to necessarily document the measures that are already in the enterprise data set. So that just makes my life a little bit easier. The second one is creating a local model PBIX for measure development and testing in an enterprise environment. So a bit of a mouthful. So again, where I work at the moment, I can connect to certified enterprise datasets hosted in the Power BI service, and I can build thin reports. The problem is that when you start to do build complex measures, you often want to test them and you want to see some of the intermediate steps and outputs as you are kind of building that measure, particularly for variables and tables that you might calculate as part of your measure. Obviously at the moment, unfortunately, you can't connect Dax Studio to a PBIX report that is created on Live Connect. And so therefore you're kind of limited. You might not necessarily have access to the actual data set upstream. So since around December last year, January this year, Microsoft released the new direct query feature for Power BI datasets, or composite models, I think is the official name. And so what I've done is for the 3 or 4 enterprise datasets, I've created a specific PBIX file for each one that is connected to that dataset in the service, but direct query or composite model is enabled, which creates a local model. And that local model supports things like Dax Studio and Tabular Editor. So all of a sudden I can now connect Dax Studio to that local model, do my development and testing. Once I've proven out my measure is correct, I simply copy the code, go back to my actual thin report and create my measure. So it's been a real godsend for development to make, in an environment where you might be a bit constrained about what you have access to. It's been really helpful. You might be thinking, why not just switch your Live Connect report to a direct query report? And the reason for that is a whole bunch of consequences around user permissions that need to be taken into account. So the users actually need to have permission to build on that data set in the service, and you might not be able to do that as the author of that report. So
John, is a thin report a report that's on a diet, or is it something else?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat window. What is a thin report?
Yes. What is a thin report? Sorry. So a thin report is just a report that is doesn't have any data in it. It's connected to a data set published in the Power BI service, it's a name that IMCA introduced me to this week, which I hadn't really heard of before, but I thought I'd mention it. So when I say thin report, I'm using interchangeably with Live Connect or Direct Connect. Another way that Microsoft has described this method of connecting to a data set in the service and building a report on it. So I've got a couple of these models, and so the way to do it, just to walk you through it quickly, is I've got an example here. So here is a report. It's currently in connected live to the Power BI dataset. If I want to turn this into my little development tool, my bridge between the enterprise dataset and Dax Studio, I just go modeling. Nope, sorry. I go So home. Oh, no. Where is that button? Sorry about this. Oh, okay. Jokes on me. This is a data set in my personal workspace. So this, so that's a good point. You can't do this with data sets that are in your workspace. So I actually have a backup plan. This is a data set that's not in my personal workspace. So if you go into the modeling view, you'll see this little button here, make changes to this model. Now, for those enterprise people out there, no changes will be made to the model upstream. This is simply creating a local copy of this model, which is still based on a remote model. No data is moving between anywhere. So if I click this, you're going to get a security warning. Click edit, takes a couple of seconds, and now you've got your kind of development environment file that you can use multiple times whenever you're working with this data set and creating complex measures. Yeah, that's kind of, any other questions on that one?
Good comments in the chat, John.
Awesome. This has been a godsend for me. Like, this is, if I don't have this, I don't know what I would have done this year for many pieces of work. The next one is leverage model view layouts to create dedicated views in complex models. So again, it's not necessarily for those enterprise data sets, but we've all seen those Power BI data sets, and let's assume they're built really well, where there are lots of fact tables and there's lots of dimension tables, and that can be a legitimate model. What I found very helpful is to create specific layouts in the relationship or the model view tab, and I'll show you how to do that right now. So if you jump over to your report, and this one here I know has a whole bunch of tables. By default, you can see it just simply, bit of a spaghetti mess. But what I would recommend to you as a report author is to kind of, click the little plus sign and build specific layouts that are relevant. In fact, I have one for Phil in one of my direct query reports that calls Phil CMark help. And it's where I've sort of laid out the tables and the fact table so that when I'm on a call with Phil, I can show him exactly, very clearly what I'm working with here. So thank you.
You're just showing him the star schema bits of your model, not all the other bits that aren't star schema, right?
Oh, yeah, no, all your models were just one table, Jonathan.
What was that?
I thought all your models were just one table. Just teasing.
So like, if I want to look at dates and say transactions, there's nothing confidential in here, and then I would call that transactions, for example. So you give it a good name, you save it, you come back here and, you can jump straight into the particular view that will help you with your understanding the relationships and how they influence other tables. So I found that quite one table to rule them all. Yeah, I think Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari have a great SQL BI blog on flat versus star schema.
It doesn't depend.
Yeah. And lastly, for me, Dax Studio is a fantastic tool. We mentioned above using it to troubleshoot and test and experiment with measure development, but I also use Dax Studio for some of my own models and just checking, the memory consumption. So, and there's a couple of reasons why your model could be larger than it needs to be. One is because you've got the auto time intelligence functionality ticked in your settings, which I'll show you where that is in a second. Or secondly, you built your model, you didn't necessarily put a lot of thought into it, maybe because you're under time pressure, and you realize that you've included a really expensive column and you're fast approaching your 1 GB limit in the Power BI service, which happened to us recently. So how can you look at your model and understand what columns are taking the most memory and find opportunities to sort of refine that? So all you need to do is open up your Power BI data set. I've got here a non-Z data set, so nothing in here that's confidential. So this is all the motor vehicle registered data. It's about 5 million rows. I suspect there's going to be a bunch of heavy, expensive columns in here. So you open it up. You open up Dax Studio. to your model.
You're not doing it from the external tools tab. That's interesting.
Oh, I could have. I was just yeah, good point, Jeff. Though, yeah, external tools. I'm too old school, and so as you can see here, there's two things to point out. One is we had the two fact tables in that model, but we also have a date table template. Oh, I don't remember seeing a date table in here. So what's happened is Power BI has generated a hidden date table for every date column, I believe, in your model. Is that correct, Phil?
Yeah, that is correct. And I have seriously seen 200 auto date timetables created in models with lots and lots and lots of rows. It's
yeah. So there's it's not usually too bad, but if you have, for example, you know, the 1st 1900, for example, as one of the dates in your field because it's 0 effectively, Power BI will generate a date table for every day in about 5 odd columns, I'm guessing, from 1900 to 2021. So those date tables can actually get pretty sizable and take up a lot of memory. So to check whether this is turned on, you go to data load in the global settings, and you see time intelligence. And you know, if you're starting with Power BI, you might leave it on for now until you start to learn a bit about modeling in the date table and stuff like that, because there is a good reason why this is turned on. But I would encourage you to learn about, you know, building a star schema with a centralized date table. But this is the culprit for why that date table exists in this model in the background. So in this case, it's actually not that bad. But how do we actually understand the impact that these additional columns and tables are having on our model's memory footprint? Well, we go to Dax Studio and we click on Advanced and we click on View Metrics. It can take a couple of seconds. And I'm not going to go into super detail about every element within here. We're just going to focus on the memory footprint. There's sometimes many reasons why a column could be taking up more memory. But if we open up the MVR table, we can see that the engine number is the column with the largest size, taking up 175 megabytes. You might not need the engine size. If you don't need the engine size and you're pressed for memory, remove the engine column. You know, so in our use case at work, we had a column called transaction ID that was unique for every transaction, and there's various reasons why it was there, but we found a way to both enable us to continue reporting as we were and remove it, and we cut our model size in half. We were actually fast approaching the 1 gig limit, and we removed that column and we went back down to 600 gigabytes. And with a rolling 2-year window on that data set, we will never hit 1 gigabyte of data, you know. So real cheap way to kind of free up some memory and continue to get the most out of that pro license. And Microsoft will probably thank you along the way somewhere as well. So yeah. And that's my 4 tips really. Bit of documentation, relationships, development tool workbook, and then memory optimization using Dax Studio.
It's supposed to be 5 tips, Jonathan, but I gave you that 5th tip yesterday, remember? Are you going to show us that one?
What was that one? Remind me.
The function, putting in the function template and, you know, double click the function.
Yes. So
just quickly show us that, because I didn't know about that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. So when you're writing a Dax measure in Dax Studio, you might go, say, summarize columns, and you go, okay, I need all these components to this function, right? These parameters, and you get excited and you start, and all of a sudden you go, oh, now it's gone. Now I've lost my guide to do this. Now over time you'll memorize these functions for better or worse, but what you can do is you can go to the functions tab at the bottom here, and we can search for summarize, and I believe just double click, and it inserts into your query window the formula, and now you can simply piecemeal add in the components that you need to actually do your query. So yeah.
And for a bonus tip, you can do the same thing in Excel. If you're writing, say, equals sum product, and you select sum product in the IntelliSense, if you go Control-Shift-A, it does the exact same thing. Very handy.
Yeah, it's great. I think
Rachel says that's amazing. I agree, Rachel. It's a fantastic tip.
I think Daniel's new Tabular Editor 3 has a really great Dax parser, as I understand it, that allows you, it will actually remind you as you're going through the different parameters, what's left to go and stuff. But yeah, this is a great way to do it in Dax Studio.
It's worth pointing out that Dax Studio is a free tool, but you can support the author by making a donation. It's something I need to do because I couldn't do my job without it. So check with me next month.
Yeah,
and Darren's a really nice guy. So
yeah, I use Dax Studio for ad hoc analytics, right? Because I can query a tabular model now that's published in the Power BI service through that development version I have locally. It's an incredible tool. It's yeah, awesome. Anyway, that's
Google
me.
Will get you there.
Cool. Onto the Jedi Master.
I'll have to confess, I only started thinking about this morning. And I've got a collection of tips from I wanted to make sure I didn't just focus on one thing, like just only do Dax only or only do data modeling. So the 5 I have, I think the one I think is everyone should really start with is the new best practice analyzer, which you might have heard of, but I just want to show you how it actually works. So I'm going to share my screen. Now, Best Practice Analyzer is hosted within the Tabular Editor product. There are 2 versions of Tabular Editor. There's the Tabular Editor community version, which is free. That's the one that's been around for a long, long time. And they have released a new paid version. But the Best Practice Analyzer is in the free version. So there's no excuse to get it. This is the first 2 downloads you should grab whenever you install Power BI desktop is Dax Studio and Tabular Editor. Now, Tabular Editor allows you to do a lot of funky things, but the thing I'm going to focus on today is something built into it called the Best Practice Analyzer. So I've got a model here. I've just connected it to a local Wide World Importers database and sucked in some tables. Haven't really done much to it. I've created a couple of measures for the other tips, but what I want to know is this following best practice rules? Are there some simple things that I can do to make this a more efficient model? Now, there's usually 3 things that we care about in BI. The three reduction objectives. We're trying to reduce how long it takes to load data into the model. That's one. We're trying to reduce the size of the model footprint at rest. And finally, we're trying to reduce the query speed. Don't worry about data viz, that's not relevant. But what Best Practice Analyzer is helps you with each of these things. So I've got my just quickly thrown together data model here. I can start Tabular Editor just from the start menu, or I can come to the external tools here and click on Tabular Editor and fire it up. And this is possibly going to open on this screen, or it's possibly going to open somewhere else. Okay, it's opening on another screen. It's coming up. Cool. So if you've seen Tabular Editor before, you can expand a whole bunch of fields and see the tables and the measures and do some fun things. But down here at the bottom, it's giving me this notification on the status bar that there are 175 best practice issues. And if I click on here, it brings up a little dialogue that explains all of the things it's found. Now, a little bit of background behind this. This tool has been put together by someone on the CAT team, Michael Kowalski, who I work with. Now, we all came together and brainstormed a whole bunch of rules that we've all learned and built up from our muscle memory with working with large enterprise customers and medium-sized enterprise customers. And we refine this through our engineering team. So there's been quite a lot of work going into each of these rules. And what each rule does is it scans your model looking for, you know, did you actually meet the rule or not? And these are what it's found in my particular model. So it's found there is a series of performance-based rules. some just Dax expression things, some maintenance, some naming conventions, some formatting. I mean, I can ignore these. I can go on and right click and say, I know about this rule. I'm happy with the way things are. But like here, it's picked up that there are 9 columns that are using floating point data. Now, floating point is probably overkill for a lot of columns, particularly anything that's just purely financial, that's happy with 4 decimal places. And if I've got a large amount of data, that's going to mean a couple of things. It's going to slow down my refresh, and it's going to make my the model size larger, and potentially slow down my query speed as well. So it's going to infringe on all 3 of the main objectives that we're trying to resolve. So this is suggesting that the tax rate column in the dimension stock item is using a floating point. Perhaps we could change that to fixed decimal. Now we could either do it here in Tabular Editor, or I could go over to Power BI Desktop and do it. And then obviously when I save it, rerun the best practice analyzer rules, then I can refresh this and get these down. Now there'll be a bunch of rules that I don't care about. There are features in here to say if I don't have a date table, I don't mind. Let's just ignore that rule. And not check this again. Do not summarize numeric columns, randomly. Let's just ignore that rule. Or interestingly, I can generate a fix script, which has gone into my clipboard. If I go to Notepad, I'm just trying to open up Notepad somewhere here locally and bring it up. What's it put into the clipboard? There's a whole bunch of things that I can paste into the advanced script editor tool within Tabular Editor, and what this will do is it'll correct that rule. It'll go through and just fix the data model, and it's away. So this is a pretty good place that you should consider opening whenever you've maybe not started your model, but when you're 3/4 of the way through the iteration, have a look to see, maybe there are some things that we could do. Like there's a measure here that's using the slash operator for the divide, which doesn't necessarily handle blank or null values very well. Perhaps we should use the divide object. Let's go to the object. Here we go. Here's my measure, and I could maybe put the word divide, the divide function, comma, and use these as parameters to fix this. And I'll tidy up my model. Now, how to actually download this? First of all, you install Tabular Editor. That's free. Then there is a GitHub repository that you can get from the Tabular Editor site, and the rules are self-updating. Well, when I say self-updating, all you need to do is copy this text here into the advanced scripting window of Tabular Editor here. You just paste it in, and what it's going to do is it's going to go out to the internet and grab this file, and it's going to place it in a local folder in your machine. It's going to overwrite them, and that's it. And then you run this. So if overnight the cat team have added a bunch of rules or removed some old ones that we don't care about, you just do this periodically, close and reopen Tabular Editor, and then you'll get a list of rules. And we can go into the BPA rules here and have a look at them. Some of these reference, they all have links to websites, for example. We can go here and actually read a little bit more about why it's suggesting this rule, and that might help me decide whether this is something I want to ignore or make an effort to actually solve. Now, this doesn't necessarily guarantee that it'll turn a very bad report into a really fast report. This is typically low-hanging fruit that makes it a lot easier. For hopefully a lot of cases, it will solve a lot of your challenges, but it's free, easy. There's no reason why you shouldn't be doing this, and just, yeah, download it into Tabular Editor. There's a whole bunch of other great features inside Tabular Editor that you should also be using it for as well, but I like this tip. And that the article that I just shared with you, or showed with you on the screen, tells you not only how to install it, but you know, there's notes, change logs, and those sorts of things. So that's my tip one.
Can you run those rules directly from the tool, Phil, without having to do the cutting and pasting? I can't recall.
It's automatic. What happens is when you put the best practice tools there, it runs them automatically for you.
No, I realise that, but what if you don't want to cut and paste 27 different best practice rules? Can you from the best practice analyzer, can you run them right from that dialog? Go just fix them?
No, I don't think so. So if we jump back to the best, if we want to fix those ones that we just saw, for example, I don't think this one is going to work. What was the one that was the generate fix script? Let's put it into the clipboard. All I do is just put it into advanced scripting, paste, and run it here. So this is, it's giving you the code that you need to put into the advanced scripting window.
Excellent. For an incredible tool, that seems like a manual step that well, maybe in Tabular Editor.
Maybe it's in the paid version. I don't know.
Sorry.
And is there a rule? And is there a rule about no emojis and measure descriptions?
Yeah. Personally, I wouldn't want it to automatically run. I personally would want to do the task of pasting and eyeballing, and I wouldn't want it to do something I'm not 100% sure about what it's doing. And I would also want to make sure I've built in some mechanism where I can roll back and, you know, that kind of stuff. So there's pros and cons, but I'd probably be a little cautious, and just, even if this happened to me, one of my rules, I would still just check that, yeah, this is doing exactly what I want to the model. But it's cool. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2. Again, it's a free tool. Yes. What we're going to do is jump to Power Query now. So following up on Jonathan's interesting idea of how do I know the parameter signature and the rules of various functions in Dax, let's have a look to find how to do something similar in Power Query or M functions. So what I'm going to do is go to Transform Data, which opens the Power Query editor. I probably should have had it open. And it's opening on a different screen. So my poor little laptop is bringing it up. Now what I have here, nice, okay. I've got a bunch of tables that are the tables that exist in my model, but what I want to do is just remind myself, I know I want to write some M, or I want to edit some M, I want to just have a look at what functions are available and what their parameter signatures are. So what you can do inside Power Query is get a list of them yourself. So I'm going to go new source, say I want to run a blank query. It's going to create a query down here. And when I click the advanced editor on that query, it's going to give me the template for a typical empty query. I'm going to get rid of all of that and just type in hash shared. Let's zoom in. That's all it's going to say, hash shared. Then when I click done and look at this query, oh, it's running. Not sure why my machine is slow, but here we go. So what it's done is it's produced effectively a list of every single function known to M. So we can click on one of these and see a bit of a description, what the parameters are, what's possible to throw into it. We can even actually double click on it, click on the function, and start giving it some options, like what would happen if we put in certain parameters and invoke it, etc. And then what we can also do is convert it to a table. I'm not my machine's running a bit slow, so we can convert this to a table, and we can do filtering on this as well to say I'm only interested in stuff to do with date or SQL or yeah. Once this converts, I'm just checking my CPU's up. Yeah, and then, I mean, this is just a standard Power Query object now, so I can put in a text filter to say, only show me functions that happen to contain the text, once this pops up, date. And boom, you know, here are all the date functions, and I can just click on one at random, and again, you know, start learning more about M and Dax, and they can just sit side by side. I don't have to load it to the model. You can just sit there as a bit of a reference guide for me when I'm, you know, editing my Dax. So, I mean, this was probably more useful back in the day before IntelliSense. We don't have IntelliSense everywhere, but it is kind of handy just to quickly do a lookup. Hey, you might be offline if that's still possible these days. You know, what you can do in Power Query. So that's my tip 2. Coming back to the Dax world, one thing you sometimes do is when you create measures, you tend to create them on that happens to be the table that you've got the mouse focused on at any particular point in time. I was messing with this a little bit earlier, and I was creating some measures on my fact.sale table. There seems to be a bit of a lag going on here. Cool, so I've got some measures here mixed in amongst my fact table. I might have some on my date table, which I'll discard. We don't want to include the that shared table. So if I want to create a special table just for my measures that doesn't necessarily have any data, probably one of the quickest ways to do that is to use the Enter Data button here at the top. And what I can do is click on the Enter Data button, and this is going to bring up this little Excel-like window. And I can just put in a 1, and we'll call this measures. And we'll load that table. This table is going to have 1 column, 1 row, and where is that table gone?
Hey Phil, one of the huge benefits of doing this, which you might mention, sorry, is that if you create like a UAT version of this data set and let people test it, and they've got measures connected to different tables in the thin reports, that putting those measures against the measure table means that if you change a table, remove a table, it won't break those measures, which has been quite horrifying. They become orphaned and lost.
All right, so I've got our measures table here. Now, at the moment, it just looks like a standard, normal table. It's got the table icon, but that's because we have a column that's not hidden. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on a measure called, say, sales down, and I'm going to specify that the home table for this particular measure now belongs to the measure table. So that's a quick tip to show you how you can change the home table for a measure. And now that I have a measure on my measure table, I'll just minimize this so I can see it again. Hopefully you can see it okay. Right, now what I'm going to do is hide the physical column, the one column with the useless piece of data in there. Hide it. And what should hopefully happen is the icon should change, and maybe it might go to the top. I might need to apply changes or change my view, like go in and out. Oh, there it is. It's at the top now. Wonderful. There it is. So it's got this little calculator icon. It's at the top, even though it's not alphabetical. And now I can go through and hopefully maybe multi-select some measures. I don't think this works. Or I can go through one by one and just pick on an individual measure, change the home table to be the measure table.
You've got a question about why you use the underscore in the chat, Phil.
I actually use a space,
Sorry.
and I don't think I need it anymore. Previously, it was a way to get it alphabetically at the top. Let's rename this. Now, the word measures is a key word. It's a reserved word, so you do have to be careful about conflicting with that. I think, yeah, the name object of a table cannot be the reserved string measures. So that's why I actually put a space in. But also I want to make sure that this sits at the top. But you could call it my measures or underscore measures or something, you know, whatever you prefer to go with. So having a measure table is a nice way to just group all your tables measures together. And if you go into Tabular Editor, you can start to introduce subfolders. So if you've got 100 measures and 10 kind of grouped together with collectively as a measure group, and another 10 collectively, you can put them in the same subfolder. So that's another good use of Tabular Editor. Now, speaking of measures, when we're actually writing our measures, there are some times when you need to write a measure that has a lot of repetitive text, like similar var, variable, whichever. And I'm just going to create a new measure. I'm going to bring up the text editor, and there's a couple of things I want to highlight to you here. So this is my my fourth tip. Okay, so I'm going to hit the little drop down here, and once I've got control of this, and man, my CPU is really struggling. Okay, cool. So I'm creating some space here. What we can do is use the Alt key. So see where my caret is here at the space line 2. I'm going to press and hold the Alt key now, and I'm going to go like this. I'm just going to click on some spaces down here, and I'm going to start typing such var x equals 100. Okay, now we can't have multiple variables with the same value, so what I can do is just quickly jump in and say, we'll call that x1, x2, x3, 4, and 5, and we can return something like return x1 plus x2. Okay, so this is a legitimate measure. Oh, that didn't save. That didn't save. 1, 2, 3. But I can like put my caret here. Same. Hold down Alt, hold down Alt, hold down Alt, hold down Alt, and just whenever if I type something, it's actually putting it in multiple different places. And you know, same with backspace. Is everybody else's screen frozen? The question I heard on voice was, is anyone else's screen frozen? Can you guys see me actually?
I can see typing? You, but I can't see any of your writing, your typing going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
All I see is var x equals 100, x1, x2.
Is this better?
No, your output's frozen.
Unfortunately, Power BI is frozen.
What I'm going to do, I'll stop sharing and I'll share again.
What you're sharing is just too damn hot.
Maybe I'm not supposed to not share this with you.
An alert's gone off in Satch's office. Phil's showing a new feature. Shut him down.
There is a really cool one that I was tempted to, but I guess I can't. Can you see my screen now?
Oh,
yes.
Phil. It's cold outside.
Okay, so I'm pressing the Alt key. 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 Can you see me like multiple selectors there? And I can start typing and I can start removing. I reckon that's pretty cool. And I can zoom. To make it actually easier, that's just Control Wheel Zoom. But there we go. That's quite a nice little tip when you are writing more complex DAX measures. You can be lazy, particularly if there's a lot of repetition in some of the lines. You can use the Alt click to solve that. So that's kind of cool. I liked it. My last one, how do I share this? Is using the text box to create a clever looking KPI visual. And if I click on page 2 here, what I've got is using the new smart text. I don't know how well this is zoomed. Oh yeah, let's zoom in a little bit like this. Okay. If I click on any point in this line chart, what I want to do is show over here the sales for the month that I'm selecting, the sales for the previous month, and then have an up or down line and some colors going on here. So you'll notice that the month I selected is lower than the previous month. So my little text box is showing not only what my sales are for this month, which is just over 4 million, what they were for the previous period, 4.9, whether it's gone up or down, but you'll notice that there's a little red arrow there and that the growth rate is also red and negative. But if I choose one that was perhaps improved from the previous month, my text box now shows green up arrow and green text for the growth rate. And this is just the standard text box visual in Power BI used in a nice creative way, which I think is kind of cool. Does this look good? Do you want to see how this was built?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll try and build it over here. So to get this working, we'll what I needed was a sales measure, sales this month, which is a simple, oh, let's move this out of the way. That's annoying. I'll click off, I'll move this down here. Okay. So we have a sales this month, which gives us, grab this month's worth of sales from the axis. There's a previous month, that's cool. A little sales up, which gives us, if the sales for this month is greater than the last month, do a little up arrow. Now the color here is not respected. And then we have the equivalent sales down, which I moved. And then a diff percent, which is this month minus the previous month divided by this month to give us a percentage value. And then my final two measures are whether my diff was up or down. And if my diff was up, present the measure. And if my diff was down, present the measure. But there's some method to this madness. So to create this in using the standard text box visual, let's just click on some blank space and go here to the Smart Narrative Visual. And I'll move it. I don't want any of the stuff that it's given me, and I'll drag it over here. I'll just get rid of it all. Cool. So what I want to just type the word sales, and let's perhaps make that bold. And then what was I doing over here? Putting the actual current sales for this month. So we say I want to add a value, and I think I might have it in my review. Nope, cool. I say we want to use sales this month, which is the name of one of my measures. So I'm going to click on that. That's the result I want. Perhaps we'll make it currency, take away the decimal places, and we'll call it sales this month. We'll save that, and it's been added to here. Now for the arrows, I need to add the arrows twice, once for the up and once for the down. Now there's two measures. The measures will either show the value if it's up or show blank, and vice versa for the down. So so these are the sales up. So I go value, sales up, which gives me this, and we'll call this sales up, and we'll save it, and it's been added. And then what we'll also do is we're going to add the sales down, which is the name of my measure. And this is the down arrow, but the down arrow will only appear if the sales have actually gone down from the previous month. So we'll call that sales down, save, and this has been added. And you get this little clock here because that's showing it's blank. Now what I can do is I can highlight this measure. I've just selected and highlighted it, and I'm going to change the color here to be red. And then I'm going to go and highlight this one, and I'm going to say change that color to be green. Now if I click off here, and you'll see now when I've gone down, the red down, or the down arrow is shown, and because the down arrow is red, that's why I get that color. But when I click on something that has been raised, you get the green arrow and the red arrow is blank, etc. I can just click in here and carry on with my smart narrative and say I want the previous period value, so we'll just add the value and we'll say sales prev month, and we'll call that a currency with two things, and we'll go prior month. Cool. And then underneath that we'll say prior period, and we'll just selectively we'll format both of these so that they're using a lighter grey color so they don't stick out so much. And then finally the growth, which for green I want to show when the value is positive, I want it to be green. When it's negative, I want it to be red. Now color blindness aside, there are probably better ways that you can do this, but just to finish this out, we've got sales diff up, which is an amount, and it's a percent, and we'll call that sales diff up, save, and then next to that, immediately next to it, I'll have my other measure, which will be the sales diff down. Okay, cool. And we'll call that sales diff down and then add that. Now only one will show at a time because that's how I built the measure. Same thing, I'll select the down one and make it red. Go to the up one and make that green. We could make it blue if we wanted, and then just underneath it we'll put some text called growth rate, which is currently formatted to blue. Just use the standard editor thing here. Cool, so that means now when I click on down, I'm getting quite a dynamic KPI using what is just the simple text box in the native, and you can center these, align these, do quite a lot of formatting and quite clever things with the Q&A and measure feature. So I think that's a pretty interesting use of the new or relatively newish smart narrative tool. And if I bring in a category that doesn't belong to this, I can just put in color here and turn it into a slicer and choose blue. This will still all work correctly as expected. And I think the last thing over here was making some form of shadow to highlight that.
Whoa. Look at Jeff. Calm down,
Isn't that beautiful?
That's great.
That actually looks really good.
So can you call those smart narrative boxes as tooltips, or do they have to be called by?
I don't see any reason why not. It's just a native visual, so you could put this into a tooltip, and just your whole tooltip could be something that's a smart narrative, where you build your logic like this, have measures that can appear and disappear depending on the result, and you can formatting them with colors and font sizes and quite interesting things. Have them side by side, put them in matrix like on a visual. I've seen some quite clever, creative uses of that. So I know it's after 7 now.
Sorry, Phil.
Yeah.
Does the smart narrative communicate with the external server, or is it all still built into Microsoft?
No, the original one that came out 5 years ago was a third-party tool. So any measure and stuff like that did go to an outside organization. There were NDA agreements and contracts, etc. I think that Custom Visual is still around. But this one here is the native Power BI smart narrative, which does a lot of the same things, but does different things as well. But it's totally contained within the data center, so there's no issues with data moving outside the tenant or going anywhere that you're not happy with. So
cool.
It's really cool.
It's awesome.
That wins, I think.
Oh,
no. I'm going to put.
Oh, wait a minute.
Okay, everybody should vote on Phil's polls, by the way.
I'm going to add the last poll, and then we'll take the winner of the 3 and put a last one in. So you've had lots of time to vote on Jeff's. So, and while I'm doing this, does anyone have?
David's got a tip.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I've got one real quick, just while you do that. All right.
Oh.
So let me just go and share my screen. Tell me when you can see that.
Yeah, see what?
Alrighty. So this is actually published. This is a report that's in the service. And when I, as a user, go and move my mouse around, see the I can't remember what you call them now, the visual headers are actually coming up over text and other things that actually form a distraction to users that are trying to view and consume this report. What I actually do is in the report itself for these items is anything I don't want the user to interact with, and typically that would be the headings, is actually turn off the visual header to stop all that interaction. And it's a better experience for the users. So it's real simple, nothing fancy, but basically if there was an option to turn off visual headers by default on report builds, that's what I'd do.
That's a good tip.
Does anybody know how to turn off individual visual headers?
Where you
Well,
select the
that's what
visual
this
and-
is.
No, that turns off everything. I've got a visual for a customer that's got drilled down, and what they want is they want the filter icon removed and the focus icon removed, and just the drill down visual or the drill down icon left there.
You can control quite a lot of the icons with the selection that's actually under here.
It's quite hard to get there. It might be good to show that again, because I struggle to find those sub-select sections with that. The UI is a bit naff with that double bar. But the issue in finding it is if the other things above are expanded, it's very, very hard. Like, David, would you expand general title and all those other things just above, just for a second? Just to show that this is why you may not be seeing them, is that
So
you have to
it's like
go
all the way down here.
and just collapse that visual header one. And
now it's sitting
then
down the bottom.
Yeah. So you've scrolled all the way down to the bottom, and you don't know if there's anything else there below it. So you actually need to turn it on.
Yeah. And so depending on the experience you're trying to control for your users, you could leave it on, but turn off the information, the warning, the errors, all that sort of stuff. Again, now you won't see it in the desktop because the desktop will still show, but when it's published, that's where you see those changes.
Okay.
But my simple one was just to stop the elements of the screen flashing as the mouse was moved over them.
Yeah, I had a boss once who insisted that that was turned off for every visual because he hated that visual element.
Yeah, exactly.
Flash,
yeah.
Which I agree with now.
Anyway, that was nice and quick for you guys. What's the results, Phil?
Well, at the moment, the winner for Jeff's tips is the column alignment.
It's ruler.
Yep. So that's winning with 5 votes, with moving tabs 3 votes, and then 1 each for collapsed panels and edit interactions. Now Jeff's poll has been up for the longest, and as Rav suggested, unfortunately guest users can't vote. But then, I mean, it should only be for the privileged elite that can vote. Well, isn't everyone a guest user? How does it work that some people can vote but not others? But okay.
Maybe it depends on whether you're using the Teams app or the web-based one.
Maybe I don't know anything about Teams, so
you better learn as 11.
Jonathan's is a little closer. The winning tip from you, Jonathan, is the create local model PBIX, 5 votes. Second was the Dax Studio for heavy columns, 4 votes. And then naming custom measures, 1, and no one liked your model view layout. I liked your model view layout, even though I didn't vote for it. So
I love you, Phil.
I think that was still a great tip. It was just the problem is you had 3 even better tips. So, and my one hasn't been up long enough, but if we have a bit of a look.
I voted on yours, Phil.
Smart narrative is winning with 5. Best practice analyzer 3. Measure table 1, and no one liked the hash shared or the no one liked the alt key. Maybe that's because my screen disappeared. I thought that was mind blowing, but all good. That's the beauty of these things, is you just don't know who's going to actually enjoy these tips.
I could use the alt key quite a bit to write stuff like, I'll come back and fix this later.
Yes.
That's a good tip, Jeff.
Yeah.
Right, so if anyone wants to come off mic and ask some questions, or if anyone has a tip that they'd like to share, otherwise, obviously, thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. It's been wonderful. We will share the recording so that if you do want to come back and replay and have a look at any of these in slow-mo and replay mode, then that's probably going to be the best way you can replicate it for yourself. Thanks, Karen.
Nice
Thanks,
to see
thanks,
that,
Chris.
it was nice to see that measures table get that calculation icon, but I can't wait until they free up that calculation icon and attach calculation group.
Yeah, recent experience.
Yep, no, I agree. So I think otherwise we'll switch back to normal networking chit chat mode for however long anyone wants to hang out for. Feel free to ask any questions.
One thing I'm working on at the moment is trying to get a really exciting guest to come. I haven't even told Phil or Jeff about this yet. I'll tell them afterwards. But someone very senior in the AI, machine learning, analytics space coming to present to us in person, hopefully, assuming there's no issues. Ex Microsoft, that's all I'll say. That's yeah.
In New Zealand?
In New Zealand, yeah.
Okay, cool.
In person, hopefully, it all works out.
Does anyone have any requests for sessions that they'd like to see? Because I mean, I do think back when we had our Women in Tech session that some people suggested it would be great to have a tips and tricks session. We'll just tick that off. It would be great to have an intro. We'll tick that off last month with Matt Ellington. So, you know, are there any other sort of requests about what people might like to see on Power BI or Excel?
I'd like to see what Jess visualised with baby names, but that's a pet subject for our group.
Yeah. Well, actually, good point. Next week, not next week, next month, we've got Daniel coming along to talk about his Gened visual in Power BI, I think. So that'll be awesome.
Amazing.
You've been using it a lot, John. I haven't touched it because it looks a bit scary to me. And if I start using it, I'll have less things to whinge about. And whinging is what I do best.
So yeah, I gather it is like a custom visual. You place it on your screen, and then you can give it some instructions, a sort of a grammar, and you've got a lot of flexibility and freedom to create your own visual.
Yeah, it's megabyte.
I see there's a suggestion in the chat to have a quick tips thing every couple of months, and actually there's no reason why we couldn't do a super quick tip every session. You know, just that might be worth doing as well, because the thing with these things is some of them are so simple, but if you haven't seen them, they're dead to you, right? I mean, I remember when I saw that tweet from, I think it was Chris Hamill, about how to collapse these optional panes, and I'm like, this has been the bane of my life. So it's great that these things see the light of day.
I see running off the chat at the moment was a request for thick and thin report information again. So that's how I do all of my stuff. Add to that composite models, and you can get very messy very quickly. So understanding what you're doing and then being able to work with it and knowing what the consequences are could almost be its own session. You just
Dax itself is hard to learn, and Dax in the context of direct query on Power BI datasets is a further step up. So Alberto Ferraro is very clear about that. So yeah, it's a very advanced topic.
I quite like something from Phil on recursion and Dax, maybe some of his generate series magic. In fact, I've got a measure I'm thinking of that I need Phil to troubleshoot for baby names, David. So it's all coming together quite nicely.
Awesome.
Yeah, you can't do recursion in Dax yet, but pivoting and unpivoting.
Yes.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking more about generate series, the stuff you do with generate series.
Yeah, pivoting and unpivoting.
Iteration, I probably should have said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Set-based programming. It's good fun. Thanks, Davisha.
Well, I think it's dinner time for those of us in New Zealand.
It is. I've got to run, guys. Thank you very much for this evening. It was awesome.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Great to see you.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording.
See you later.